I certainly believe that things like scales, arpeggios, and things like that are very important to get very early on in the training, because it's those, it's not totally exclusively true, but most of piano playing is made up of octaves, thirds, sixths, single notes that are in scales or arpeggios or some form of a chord. And so, that accounts for not all, but a great deal of what music is comprised of. And so I think tackling these individually from the beginning is a very important thing. So I think the first thing that one must address with young students has to do with the hand position. And has to do with a healthy hand position where it's very natural. The fingers are not like this, the fingers are not clawed like this, but that it's really following the shape of the hand, and that they gain a certain individuality of the different fingers to be able to lift one without lifting the other, so to speak. And so, as I said, I define technique as what happens between the sounds. And I also believe that the purpose of technique is to serve the music, and the music is not there to serve the technique. And so part of, I think, what I try to ingrain in my students very early on when we look at just simply beginning repertoire is, okay, this is supposed to be soft. And so how do we make a soft sound? Where do we move from? Should we use the whole arm? Should we use just an individual finger? How do you make a loud sound? The left hand is supposed to play a chord. How do you get all three notes to sound at the same time? And so we explore different hand positions and different finger weights. And so I think that, there's such a role in piano playing for the wrist and for the arm, but the thing that actually connects our bodies to the instrument is our fingers. And so I think that it kind of starts with the fingers and then works up as needed. And so independence of fingers and balance of hand position and control of the hand position, and also the malleability of the hand position. If it needs to extend out and then come back in, how are you going to move? How far are you going to go? And so these things, I think, are ideas that are explored with beginners. How it's explored really depends on the age of the beginner, and so on and so forth. By the time you get to intermediate repertoire, again, I feel like technique is embedded fully into the execution of the music itself. I'm a huge fan of etudes and things like that. So I certainly assign repertoire and that specifically focuses on building a high quality technical foundation. But for me, it really does all come back to the music and what is the musical intent, and then how do you move in that way. I tell my students often there are only three reasons, as far as I have come up with, for playing a wrong note. And the first reason is that you simply don't know well enough where it is that you need to go. And so that's an issue here, And the second reason is that you do know where it is you go. You're supposed to jump down there, but you have an error getting there. And so that has to do with movement. That has to do with geography. And then the third reason for a wrong note is that you do know where to go. You do know exactly how to get there, but you're just not quite focused enough. And there's just a lapse in concentration. But what of course is obvious is, depending on which of the three reasons it is, that's a very different path towards solving the issue. If it's an issue of not knowing well enough where to travel, that's one solution path, versus really knowing the music but having a geographical error getting there. That's another path, versus a lack of focus. And I think that economy of motion in piano is absolutely essential. I have many students that, for instance, when they come and play chromatic scales, they play on the very edge of the white key, and then deep in the black key, and then on the edge of the white key. And so very fast, they're trying to get in and out of the piano as they do that. It's just a very easy example. And I always say to them, I think you probably play that better than I could if I played that way. It's often very admirable, but it's so much harder than it needs to be. If you really do look at the shortest distance between two notes and how to get there, just that one principle by itself can, already take so much of the workload, the unnecessary workload off of your body. Now, of course, there are moments where you really need that movement into a key. And so, of course, the first principle always when determining technique is, what do you need for the sound? The sound always has to be the target. And then you get back into the science and engineering of it a little bit, into, okay, now for that sound, how do I get there? And I really do believe that, to be a great pianist, a great musician, you have to have one part of your brain that is completely dedicated to artistic ideals and imagination and possibilities of sound. And there's another part of you that has to be kind of an engineer. That is to say, okay, now with that idea, how do I operate this box, this piece of wood with strings in it and keys, and make that idea which I have here actually come across in reality? Because the only thing that separates what you have in here from making it real is, of course, your body, which is your technique, which is how you move to create it. And so I feel like, those three parts, the instrument itself, the imagination you have, and then the engineering and physics of how you create with your body that sound, those three things are intrinsically linked to one another.